Yo, what is going on? Crispy Tots here, and we have a new review on Diablo 4 from Force. Force has a few videos out there already. He's got one where he already explained what he likes about Diablo 4, and he's got one going over other people's critiques on Diablo 4. So this seems to be like his overall final conclusion of a review, and it just dropped literally 10 minutes ago. So let's get it started.
Now that the Diablo 4 beta has ended, I've had time to reflect and gather my thoughts about my time with the game thus far, which at this point has been about 80 hours between the various betas and some preview events. And now I can really officially say that I am extremely disappointed that I can't play this game for like another 3 months. Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? What am I supposed to do? Make YouTube videos?
This last 4 days has been the longest 4 days ever.
Clickbait thumbnails? Play another ARPG? Like, seriously, who does an open beta 3 months before the release of a game? It's unbelievable, dude. At least that's how my brain felt when the servers closed earlier this week. I don't know about you. Yeah, I played through a majority of the beta weekends here, spending time with every class, doing every event, running every dungeon, searching for those stupid altars of Lilith. Where do they hide these things? I know I could just look at the interactive maps online. I don't want to look at the interactive maps online. I want to play the game. That's what I
Who here spent hundreds of hours farming Makoko seeds, finding every single freaking seed in Lost Ark. I know this guy did.
So I only found like 5 altars of Lilith. I also killed the world boss a few times. I grouped up and played with some friends. We did the Core Dragan Zone event. We conquered the Butcher. And I spent the last day or so no-life grinding for higher item level gear and Ubel farming to gamble for legendary aspects in a beta that was about to shut down because I'm deranged apparently. I know none of it carries over. Although to be honest with you, I kind of like the tinkering around with this stuff and kind of fine-tuning, diving in and learning how these games work and efficient farming routes and all of that. You know, you could carry that knowledge with you into release or something. I don't know. Now, don't worry if you are looking for criticism and critique, because I do have plenty of that in store as well, much of which is going to align with what some other people and many other people have been discussing over these past couple of weeks, although there are some specifics that I want to touch on and really drill into, ultimately with the goal of trying to make Diablo 4 overall a better game. But I cannot deny that the core of this, the core of Diablo 4, is something I really enjoy. It's just one of those games where as I play, I'm having a good time, the moment to moment is a lot of fun, and I want to keep on playing.
This is something that a lot of people are kind of coming at each other with, like, oh, how can you say it's a good game? The beta is only to from levels 1 to 25. You only saw a fraction of the game. Yeah, all those people are very correct. But what we have played in the game, if you have enjoyed that part of the game, then it is very easy to say that you will now enjoy the entirety of Diablo 4. Like, yeah, you might not like some of their endgame decisions, but if you like the core mechanics and the core playing of what you already experienced, then you're going to experience that even more throughout the entire game, enjoying the game. So yes, I am one of those people who thoroughly enjoyed the beta, enjoyed what I had to see, what I played, and am very much looking forward to all the problems getting fixed and the additions being added. So I think this is what he's saying.
Overall, I like what I've seen of D4 quite a lot. I am looking forward to what else the game has to offer. What it has to offer in the other zones, in the PvP content, in the various endgame systems, and then whatever is to come in that first post-release season and beyond, which in my opinion is one of the best parts of this hobby, when you find a game that just clicks for you and you've got something on the horizon to look forward to. That is exactly where I'm at right now with Diablo 4.
This is
Before
huge.
we really dive into things though, sit with me for just a moment for a word from today's sponsor.
Well, before the very important sponsor, that's a huge topic, is there's a lot of games that get released, a lot, and there's not many of them that you can play for an hour and be like, this is it, this is the game that I want to play. And here it is for literally millions of people. 2.6 million people unlocked the beta pup, which means 2.6 million people, at least 2.6, played the beta, which is insane. So you can say there are millions of people that do enjoy this game. Even if we cut it at 50-50, 1.3 million people loved it and the other hated it. Say, well, even if we said that, that's still over 1 million people that loved the game.
Today's video is sponsored by Star Trek Timelines. This is an interactive strategy role-playing game for mobile. You will play as a captain taking command of a starship and exploring deep space. You'll have to complete missions and engage in ship battles in order to level up and earn captain's rewards. There's a variety of warp destinations to explore as you answer distress calls and aim to bring order to the chaos. You can participate in events and gain experience, influence factions, and rank up on leaderboards to unlock special rewards. You can also invite your friends, create and join a fleet, and participate in daily and weekly events. If you are a fan of the Star Trek series, you'll find a lot of your favorite characters: Spock, Picard, Captain Kirk, Pike, and many more. You can collect your favorites and assemble the best Starfleet crew. Star Trek Timeline is free to play. It is available on the Amazon App Store. Download it by clicking on the link in the description below. Okay, so let's dive.
Why the hell are we reviewing Diablo 4 when we have Star Trek Online? Oh my God.
Into my Diablo 4 review. To start things off, I want to make it clear we are reviewing a beta, not the full game. And while this does give us a look at the core experience, how the game plays, and some of the various features and systems, it also came with quite a few limitations and restrictions. We were only able to reach character level 25. The max is 100. We only got to play through the Fractured Peak, one of the game's 5 overworld zones, with there apparently being a 6th zone, Hell, located underneath those. Also, mind you, Fractured Peaks appears to be the smallest of the 5 overland zones. We've seen these maps laid over each other. This looks to be the tiniest of all of the open world zones in the game. The highest rarity of gear that we saw was legendary, and there are still uniques above that, which are said to provide significantly stronger and more interesting boost, and the data mined details look to bear that out. And of course, we didn't get to even get a glance at any of the endgame systems. We haven't seen the Nightmare Dungeons. We haven't seen the zone-wide Helltide events. We haven't seen the PvP in the game, specifically those PvP zones. We haven't engaged with the Tree of Whispers or this game's bounty system. We haven't touched the Paragon board or the glyphs. Out of the game's world bosses, we have seen 1, and I'm pretty sure they're launching with either 4 or 5. Or in other words, outside of getting a feel for the general gameplay loop and the open world activities,
there is a lot of stuff being offered in this game. And sure, you'll level through the game, get to 100, and maybe realistically you'll only be doing 1 or 2 of those things over and over. But they have a lot of stuff to offer us in this game, and I am incredibly excited.
Still a heck of a lot of game that we haven't seen or played as of yet. So with that in mind, what do I think about what we have seen? What do I think about my time with the game thus far? I'm going to start off with the things about it that I like. So first of all, it seems to me like a lot of reviews that I've watched so far just kind of gloss over or barely mention this, but the gameplay in Diablo 4 is really good. Like, it is top tier stuff, and it cannot be overstated how much gameplay is greater than like everything else in the game. This is
gameplay has been across the board the #1 review, like the best thing about the game by far, by any of the reviewers out there. There is one individual, well, there's 2 that I personally know, but one that I won't name here because
it's always been I'm not even gonna get into it. Strong suit of Blizzard games in general, and even with all of the changes the company has seen over the years, all of the turnover and all of the turmoil, this remains true. They make games that just feel good to play, and Diablo 4 is no exception. Whether I was hurling rocks with upheaval on the Barbarian, zapping and incinerating enemies on the Sork, corpse exploding on Necro, raining down 1 billion arrows on the Rogue, or slashing and bashing stuff as a werewolf and bear, AoEing groups, single target fights versus bosses, just moving around, even kicking barrels, everything that surrounds playing the game, the moment-to-moment feel, the combat, it is so good across the board. Now, in my prior video, why I'm excited for Diablo 4, I did detail some of what it means for a game to feel good, like what are the mechanisms associated with that. I'm not going to completely rehash that here, but the gist of it is low input latency and responsive controls, i.e. your character responds properly and in a timely manner to your inputs. Smooth and high quality animations for the character, the attacks, and then how those are received by targets and the environment. Accurate hit detection does play a big role, and Blizzard has detailed some improvements that they've made from Diablo 3 to Diablo 4 to ensure that hitboxes match up with the attack and spell animation. So for example, when you swing your sword, the damage is applied with the animation precisely following it along its path instead of just happening in a general area when the animation takes place. And while it may seem insignificant, this small detail adds a lot to the feeling of impactfulness. And then on the other end of that is the enemies themselves and the environment and how those react to being hit. And in D4, they've also done a lot of work here as well to match the death and ragdoll animations to the impact type, the direction, and the power of a particular attack. And then topping all of this off is the game's audio. Each of these elements coming together account for a majority of what we talk about when we say a game has good gameplay or a game feels good. And if you've played enough games, it's pretty obvious when this stuff is done poorly, but I do think it can kind of be taken for granted when it's done well. And Blizzard, in my opinion, with Diablo 4 has done it well. And yeah, the combat trumps a whole lot else when it comes to determining whether or not I'm gonna have a fun time playing the game. It is one of the main reasons I have been having fun with Diablo 4, but there are others, and many of which are important for the long term keeping me around. Which then brings us to the open world. While a bit divisive for some old school Diablo and ARPG fans, I personally really enjoy the game's open world nature, in particular the sense of variety that comes with it. Now, the first time we played Diablo 3, we all pretty much had a near identical experience. It was exactly the same. We ran through the campaign from start to finish, moving from one mission straight into the next until we reached Diablo. There really wasn't any other path of progression when you played Diablo 3 for the first time. With Diablo 4 on your very first playthrough, you can just go straight through the campaign, but there is so much else going on in the open world, stuff that isn't directly tied to the main story, but rather these side activities that are still worth your time and are still interesting to do. These include running the various dungeons for the legendary aspects, farming world events for that currency for the gambling vendor, clearing strongholds to reveal new dungeon and fast travel locations, even brand new towns, and doing everything else that is tied to zone completion, which you want to do in order to unlock the account-wide boost for things like skill points and potion charges and paragon points, and then doing the PvP once that is available at release, either just for the fun of it or for the associated loot and cosmetic rewards. And then there is the killing of the world bosses, which is the only way to add sockets to your gear that don't already have sockets. Heck, even the main story quest itself is going to offer some variety in how you do it, because after the tutorial, we're given the choice to tackle the first 3 zones in whichever order we want. We know in the beta that we were confined to Act 1, the Fractured Peaks, but that's not the case at release. Some people, yes, will be leveling in Fractured Peaks, while others can go straight to Acts 2 or 3. That is an option. We have a choice of doing Acts 1, 2, and 3 in whatever order we want after the tutorial. So that, combined with the open world and all of the variety of activities that come with it, is just a real enjoyable change of pace to the core Diablo experience for me personally. I mean, heck, even with adventure mode in Diablo 3, ultimately every season I was just bouncing between running rifts and doing bounties for materials. That was it. Like, those are the 2 things I'm doing. I'm farming gear, pumping up my gems until I eventually stop playing. Straight out of the gate though, Diablo 4 just has so much more variety of activities broken up into these different buckets, with each one of those buckets having a clear purpose for the gear and account progression gameplay loop. I just really like this. I really enjoy this variety. Another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with the open world were the multiplayer elements. So Diablo 4, as you probably know, is what we would call a shared world game, meaning that you're going to see other people as you move through the play space. Now, in the beta, this seemed primarily relegated to these particular parts of the map where group activities were located. So these included the public events, the ones where you're asked to like help a ghost, find the remains of their relative, or rescue a caravan, or stop some sort of a summoning ritual. There were the boss locations, yes, the world boss of course, but then also mini bosses like that level 35 elite that people were farming for the highest item level gear that was available in the beta. And then there are the zone events in the beta. This particular one was located in Core Dragon. It's kind of like a public event, but at a much larger scale, multi-phased, and way more challenging. Anytime you were in any of these particular zones, these like named sections of the map, you would see a handful of other people doing these activities alongside you. Now, I'm well aware that this isn't everyone's cup of tea, but
yeah, I was just gonna say, a lot of people specifically don't like that. They don't like that they're doing an objective and it gets interrupted by somebody that can do it either much better or makes it harder in any way. But screw that, man. I love it. I think it's great. Every public aspect of this game, every group activity, every party thing that you can do, love it. We'll always love it. That's just a big thing of mine. Definitely a fan. My experience in the game when I played it was I only ever saw one or two other people. I think, out of the 20 random events that I did, probably 5 of them were with another player. The zone event only had 2 other players when I did that. So a lot of it, it's speculation, all how you experience it. But I didn't see that many players personally.
But it is something that I really like. I enjoy seeing other people, helping them and being helped with the group content, working together to tackle these difficult tasks. For me, it kind of helps breathe a little bit of extra life into the world, and I do enjoy the sense of community that brings when you're doing stuff together. Like having 12 players smacking away at the world boss, dying to his massive whirlwind cleave and poison puddles, then trying to res somebody, and then last second, right before getting hit with some AoE attack. It's just really fun. I mean, it's what I love about the MMO genre, which, the Diablo franchise traditionally wasn't, yes, but clearly now is moving more in that direction. Something else I really loved were the classes. I've played every class at this point, spending the most time on the Barbarian, the Sorceress, and the Necromancer, and besides balance tuning, I enjoyed my time with each one of them. I feel like they all have a really distinct identity, not just visually and to their spells, but their playstyles as well. Like, it feels like they've done a really good job at making each of them feel quite unique in how you move through the world, but also how you engage in combat, the way you approach groups of enemies and single target bosses, the positioning, the CC, the counters, the dodging. I just feel like they've done a really good job with class design. It feels like every single class has its own unique reason to play it, but beyond the class fantasy and the visuals. I am still miffed that there's no paladin class in the game, but it's probably coming at some point, right?
I was just saying this with my friends. Screw the paladin class, screw the crusader, screw the holy class. What about a demon class? A death knight. There's been a lot of people saying, hey, it would be cool to have death knight in the game. How cool would it be to have some sort, because you have the Inarius and Lilith, they're on each side of the eternal conflict, but they come together, they do their thing, and they create Nephilim. And there are lots of Nephilim, which means there are a lot of angels and a lot of demons that don't agree with the eternal conflict. So why can't there be a demon class? I'm saying it now, I think there's going to be a demon class for the first ever demon class in a Diablo game. It's going to happen. It's going to be great.
I think it's safe to assume. Something else I really, really enjoyed were the random events, and I'm not talking about the world events because those are actually pretty static. You play enough, eventually you will get to know every single area, what possible events are going to spawn in here. No, I'm talking about stuff like the Butcher. I wasn't expecting something like that, just walking through a dungeon, all of a sudden, the Butcher to appear and start beating the crap out of us is basically what happened. We were able...
If you didn't know about the Butcher and you had to fight him all of a sudden, did you die? I think 100% of people that didn't expect or know about the Butcher fought him for the first time and died. Changed my mind. If any of you actually killed him on a whim, then you're God.
To clear him, but boy, that was a unexpected and really pleasant surprise. And that sort of thing at the moment, I believe, is specific to the Butcher, but I do hope that that's something that they incorporate much more of in the future. Having these random unexpected encounters out of nowhere, out of the blue, as you're just doing some other activity in the game. Really surprising, really enjoyable. It was a fun challenge, and there was an extra sense of satisfaction from overcoming said challenge. I also want to say, anytime a game can get me into some sort of a farming loop, whether it's like XP level farming or gear farming or resource farming, it's something that I find really satisfying. When I get to the point where I am trying to like efficiently complete a particular task, solving basically the puzzle to that efficiency, it's so rewarding for me. And that happened to me even just in the beta. In particular, legendary aspects. I was farming the public events for Obols, and what I ended up doing was trying to find the ideal route, which was for me on the west side of the map. I was bouncing between 4 events, so I would teleport to one location where 2 events were really close to each other. I would do those quickly, then teleport to another location on the southwest of the map, at which point there were 2 other public event locations really close together. When I was going through the process of trying to farm legendary aspects, I was just constantly bouncing between these 2 areas, trying to get as many Oobles as possible, to gamble as much as possible to get those legendary aspects.
I definitely caught myself staring at the map going, oh, what is the fastest route of farming? Like, what could I do to get the most out of my next 3 hours that I have? And then I was like, wait a minute. It's all going to get deleted. And then I just scrapped that idea out of my head, and I just kind of randomly walked around, did dungeons. But when the game releases, that map is out and I'm studying it.
Aspects. The same thing happened for farming high eye level gear, in particular in the beta. That zone event, the Gathering Legions up at Core Dragon, that was the only level 30 zone in the beta. All of the other zones were capped at level 25, which was the player level cap. But because this was a level 30 zone, the mobs in there were a higher level and they dropped higher level gear. But especially the Wrathful Oscar Reed, which was a level 35 mob located at Cameo's Landing west of Nostrava, he would drop item level gear that was above 400. It was the best gear as far as I'm aware that you could get while in the beta, and I was farming the crap out of it. And then also just going through the process of learning where and how to.
Same thing. I killed him over and over again for probably 5 minutes, and I was like, all right, let's move on with this.
To efficiently farm yellows and where to farm gold, which for me, I managed to locate one of the dungeons where you could just quickly go through 9 elite packs in like just a couple of minutes, doing that puzzle solving, doing that efficiency calculations, trying to find the best routes for stuff. I know it's something that some people hate in gaming, and I would say that I dislike it when it gets to the point that you have completely solved it and then you're just executing, but learning that process and then learning how to do it as efficiently as possible, it is a rewarding thing, just so long as that's not all you end up doing for the rest of your play experience. And I experienced that just in the beta. I cannot wait to be going through that learning process at full release once we have all of the content. So that pretty much amounts to what I would consider the high points, the pros, the things I really enjoyed about Diablo 4 from my playtime so far. Now let's talk about some of the stuff that I would like to see improved. For starters, inventory management was not great. In particular, gems. Please, please, please get the gems out of the base inventory. With the way they manage inventory now, broken up into just these rectangular boxes, whereas in Diablo 3, there was much more, just many more spots available when the different size of items took up a smaller amount of space. Gems take up a huge amount of space in your inventory, way too much space, and that's just something they need to remove. I actually believe that they've talked about doing this as a potential thing in the future. I mean, we already have separate tabs in our inventory for things like aspects and quest items. Put the gems somewhere else. You know, when I'm farming, I'm just constantly picking up new gems all of the time, so they're always taking up like a fourth of my whole inventory, and it doesn't even make sense to transfer them into the stash because you're just going to pick up new gems, which will take up those slots as well. So you might as well leave your gems in the inventory the whole time. You're going to keep getting new ones, so just let them stack up. It's just annoying. I think they should get rid of it. I think the skill tree needs improvements. You know,
I can agree.
There's a lot of memes about it's not being a skill tree, it being a skill twig. Sure, that stuff is true, but I just think navigating it is a little bit clunky. Moving around, like clicking and dragging as you're trying to get to different parts of the tree. I feel like they could just make it snappier. I would probably prefer if there was just literal categories like pages or something for each of your basic, your core skills, your ultimates, and everything in between. The way the navigating of this tree, it feels, I'm sure, like it's fine on a controller, but I don't love it on mouse and keyboard. It just, I think a little awkward.
Yeah.
I also would love to see if they added a word filter for the skill tree. I know that you can like search by categories, but unless I was just blind, which is possible, but I couldn't see an option for just like a keyword search beyond the ones that they just gave you innately. Because there were numerous times where I was going through my skill tree where there was some particular thing, some phrase that I wanted to search for, but it wasn't on my list of options. So I just simply couldn't search for it. Oh, and this has been drilled into the ground, but the way respecking works right now feels so awful. If I want to change my basic skill, I have to remove like 3 or 4 points from the end of my skill tree before I can even invest the points in the beginning of the skill tree during where the basic and the core skills are. Because if I try to take a point out of one of the basic skills, it says you can't do this because it's going to break the skill twig on the way down. So I got to like pull points from the end, put them in the top, then take them away from the skill that I don't want anymore, and then put them back in the end. It just, it doesn't feel intuitive. And I feel like there's definitely a much better, a better way that they could present this and manage it so that it wasn't so awkward to.
I felt like a freaking scientist, man, trying to configure my whole tree so that I could just change some at the end, but not in the beginning. But then I had to change some in the beginning. Yeah, I definitely agree with him on this. I don't know how they could change that and keep their same format, though. I don't hate the idea of having pages for skills, but then that kind of, it just removes the whole format of what they're trying to go for, like a skill tree. But I mean, I guess Diablo 2 had skill trees with just separate pages, but then they're not linked together. Like in Diablo 4 right now, they're linked. They're all linked together. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would fix that and still have the same system.
Whenever I wanted to change one spell, I think it could use some quality of life big time. There's quite a few things in D4 that I think could use some quality of life improvements. When it comes to world scaling, I do think that the base idea of the system is fine. I've played plenty of games that have world scaling. I just think that they need to retune it a little bit. Basically, at the moment, whenever you level up, you appear to get weaker. In fact, I'm pretty sure you do get weaker because the damage that you do seems...
This is a very common topic that I've seen drastically different reviews
to
on.
be tied to the level of your enemy as they compare to the power level of your gear. So what that means is when you level up, the enemy's level increases, but your gear stays the same. Your gear level stays the same until you find upgrades. So you level up and you should be getting more powerful, but even with that extra skill point, most of the times you feel weaker until you start replacing your gear. I just don't love how it's implemented, or at the very least, I think...
So I can agree with him in that aspect, because he does mention this in almost all of his videos. When you level up, you immediately scale to the outside world. So you level up and the world levels up, which means the world gets harder. That means you're getting weaker as you level up because the world gets harder. However, you know, there's different ways to look at this, but he thinks it's a complaint that you don't get stronger until you get good gear. But that actually makes it so the gear that you find is that much more impactful. It feels good to find new gear. I can't tell you how many times in games where you're just putting gear on and you don't feel any difference. Whereas in this, yeah, what you level up, maybe you might feel weaker, but as soon as you get new gear, you're like, oh shit, I'm actually much stronger now. But on the contrary, once you level up again, then that gear and then you feel weaker and you got to find new gear. But I do like how finding the new gear feels important.
Think that they should tighten it up a little bit. I think if they want to keep going with that approach, that's fine, where you're doing that constant ladder climb. You're up a little and then you're down a little, you're up a little more, you're down a little more. That yo-yo, that back and forth. Just tighten it up so that it isn't such a big, so that it doesn't feel so bad to level up. It shouldn't feel bad to level up is basically the main point here. When it comes to...
I never actually experienced that. I never leveled up and then immediately was like, oh man, I wish I didn't level up because now I'm weaker. The only thing I've seen is when you're in a party with a low level, I've seen a lower level clear a mob faster than me. That's the only thing I experienced, but I never felt weaker as I was leveling up. Maybe because I was just blindly going through and killing everything anyway. I don't know.
Performance, I do feel the game generally ran well, but the network issues made it feel like performance was bad, if that makes any sense. Like, as I was generally playing, things were pretty good. But anytime I was running between the various zones with public events, every one of those named little areas that do seem to be their very own instance where phasing takes place. Once I got to those public event areas, I would notice every single time I moved between zones, there was stuttering for the first few seconds. And pretty bad hitching that felt really awful and made it appear like the game was running poorly. But again, I'm pretty sure it's just tied to the network issues, because the main culprits were anytime I came across public events, the zone events, the strongholds, the towns, and the world bosses. These locations, big hitching, felt awful. So much of the play experience will involve going into those spots where there are other people, and the fact of the matter is, it was pretty chuggy. It felt pretty bad in those instances. So that is something I feel like they need to address.
That's something where I think it's such an obvious issue. Like, that's an issue. Like, that needs to be fixed. So to me, I don't even say it. I don't even review that, because to me that's gonna get fixed. Like, if that doesn't get fixed, people will stop playing the game, because every 5 minutes you move to a new zone and you lag into it, or you do something. Because I definitely experienced that going from zone to zone, and that's also a big argument about hardcore players. If you're a hardcore player, go into a new zone in an open world with monsters everywhere, and you lag into the zone and all of a sudden they spawn on you. Yeah, you can't have that. You'll have hardcore players freaking out.
Optimization, this is a really hot topic issue, been getting a lot of heat from a lot of community, the gist of which really basically revolves around the fact that legendaries appear to play a crucial role in your character build, much more so than where you are putting your skill points or the Paragon board. Legendaries do play a big role. Gear plays a big role in the power of your character, and in particular in how your build functions and the strength of your build. But then I think more so, and the point that I am more in agreement with, is all of this legendary gear that is just boring, and particular things that just give you a flat % increase instead of just like making the skill better by default in the tree progression. Take the 30% increase to basic skills and just put it in the skill tree. Don't associate with gear. I really feel like it feels better to find items when there is a massive benefit or changing of how skills function and how a build functions. I think that legendaries and above should be relegated just to that sort of thing. Things like the Necromancer's Corpse Explosion skill, a legendary aspect. Like, yes, it might have been a little overtuned, but that aside, that is a fun legendary to find, and that's the kind of the basic template that I think legendary gear and unique gear should be focused on, because the flat % increases in damage, it's just boring gear to find, and I'd rather it just like not exist and the legendaries just be those really cool, interesting pieces. Personally.
Yeah, I can agree that it is a little bit boring to find a legendary where its power is it gives 30% attack speed to just your basic skill. I can agree with that. But having those things, having those options gives you more build potential. You can then find the gear that you want and equip the gear that you want to work towards a basic attack build or skills that work really well with your basic attack. Putting it in your skill tree is just going to furthermore cloud the skill tree. You're just going to have all these random passives, which we're gonna have regardless with the Paragon tree. We're gonna have that 50 levels of Paragon points. So I do agree that it is boring to find those, but I don't think it's necessary to remove them. I think they can be useful, And to keep going with that, if you made the way gear is right now, if you made every single legendary gear a very impactful thing, that just will multiply things way more than they already are. There's already high multipliers going on, and that will make balancing issues. Like having just all OP gear will just make things way grandiose. Which, I mean, might not sound like a bad thing to some of you guys, but I think in a numbers game, that would definitely make it start looking more like Diablo 3, which they're actually actively trying to not have like all those big numbers and those crazy damage modifiers. Are actually actively working against that, but I think it's almost inevitable, especially reaching level 100. Once you get to 100, your multiplier numbers are going to be up there, man. And I know they have an armor system, a damage reduction system on enemies to prevent that, but I don't know. We'll have to see.
Another thing that gets brought up really often is the dungeon system. I do agree the layout and structure of their procedural layouts is pretty formulaic and does feel a little repetitive, but I'm just not sure how much of an issue this will be come release, given the wide breadth of content and other things to do that we are expecting and that we're going to have at our disposal. Yes, we will be running a lot of Nightmare Dungeons, that is true, with the additions that Nightmare Dungeons are supposed to be bringing, and then the fact that we're not just going to be farming Nightmare Dungeons. I don't know that this is as big of a deal, at least for me, that a lot of people seem to be making it out to be. And then finally, my last major critique or criticism or thing that I would like to see change or improved is just some more stabs at innovation, at variety, and at different types of group content. I think the base of the game and the open world and all of that stuff I like, but a lot of it does feel like pretty well-worn territory in open world games, in shared world games, and I would like to see Blizzard take some more risks and offer different types of content beyond what's there. It gets brought up a lot, but I would love to see raids, even if we're just talking 6 to 8 players, just something that's slightly larger group than the basic dungeon group, and activities that require group coordination, that we're not just talking about DPS checks and survivability checks, but things that really emphasize positioning or completing certain tasks that aren't just damaging the boss. I just think it'd be a lot of fun if a game like Diablo 4 had more of this. I would love to see more side activities, downtime things like dice games or fishing, or some more mini games and puzzles just to help mix things up and add variety. Yes, it is Diablo. Yes, the core of the experience is click on things so they explode and you get loot. I don't want that to change, but I would like to see some just additional mixing up of things. I would also like to see way more PvP variety than they're talking about. But Force, you idiot, you haven't even played the PvP yet. Yes, I know, but we do know at the moment that PvP is currently going to be relegated to just these open world zones, and that's fine and good, and I'm excited for that. But I would also really like some of the structured PvP stuff like arenas, and there's a whole other list of things that they could potentially do, and hopefully
variety is something that can greatly expand the game. Obviously, it's variety. I do agree with everything that he's saying there. Variety with all aspects will almost always make a game better. Like, yeah, you could add fishing into a game and never fish once in your 1,000 hours of playing this game. But what if all of a sudden I'm like, man, I just ran 30 dungeons. Let's go try out fishing, you know? Let's go throw some stuff, you know? It's cool to have that option to just get off the daily grind. Do you know what I'm saying? So it would be cool to see something like that, yes.
hopefully that is what we end up getting in the season.
As for PvP, I'm a big PvP nut, man. I would love arenas, seasoned PvP. I would love ranked. That would be so cool, man. I really hope. I mean, I'll give them 3 months after release to see if they have any sort of plans for PvP, because I know PvP is going to be a disaster with the way builds are, the way characters are, the way a level 25 barbarian can crit for 350,000. Yeah. Granted, I know it's not going to be the same in the game because the loot rate's going to be different, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I know. But end of the day, I'm excited for PvP, okay?
Seasons. Some common complaints that have come up a lot, but on second thought, I really don't care all that much about. One would be class balance. Not that I am okay with imbalance, but I don't feel like that's such a major issue, because when it comes to class balance, a lot of times we're just talking about tuning numbers, like changing the percentage damage values and survivability of the different classes and how they feel in the leveling up process. And ultimately, class balance is going to be focused on the end game, the max level characters. That doesn't mean they shouldn't tune things, because if the druid feels awful for a lot of players and they abandon the class by the time they get to level 15, that's not good either. But me saying I don't care about it is that I feel like that can be simple enough of a fix, way more simple than overhauling, scrapping, or inventing entirely new systems. So that's what I mean when I say I don't care about it. I feel like it's easy enough and they should be able to fix it. And yeah, stuff like complaints.
There's nothing more rewarding in an MMO where you level through the weakest character in the game and it drags and drags, but then you hit max level and boom, you are now basically the strongest class in the game. WoW does that a lot. There are other games like a lot of MMOs. So I don't, everyone says, oh, we gotta balance the characters leveling. Yeah, like sure, but it would be, you know, there's just nothing more rewarding than that feeling of drudging through the mud in a character and then coming out the other side as the strongest class.
It's about the user interface and the font. It's just really, it's not on my list of priorities. You know, make it a good user experience, make a good UI. And the only possible way I could see myself caring about a font is if it became like an accessibility issue where people can't read the font for whatever particular reason. If that's the case, give us more font options, but not liking a particular font, I've got Microsoft Word if I'm looking to stare at my ideal fonts. Having ideal fonts is not why I come to games. It's more dismissive than I mean it to sound, but I just...
Yeah, I've never once read something in the game and been like, why is the font like that? That's a weird font. No, we're playing a video game here. Stop judging font.
Really don't care. And ultimately, I want to wrap up by saying that the large percentage of my time and my thought about this game is positive. And there's still so much we haven't seen. All of the endgame systems, the Nightmare Dungeons, the Helltide events, the open world bosses besides the first one, the Tree of Whisper system, the PvP zone, the Paragon board, and the highest end gear, of which, by the way, Blizzard has come out and said, the Codex of Power in particular, that thing where we could look at all of the legendary aspects, that apparently is less than half. So there's a lot more variety and differences than what we've seen, even in that list of different abilities.
So that's crazy. The Codex of Power, like you said, where you read all of the legendary affixes and legendary powers. That, like you just said, that being less than half of what's available in the game. That's crazy. That just goes to show how many different builds and potentials. Like, sure, there's going to be the meta builds, but the fact that there's going to be that many different varieties and areas to build into, that's really exciting. That's really cool.
That's exciting. I definitely think that's exciting. Oh, and one other
I
thing,
agree.
something else that we haven't seen that is going to be really important that I feel like people just forgot about or haven't been bringing up, the store and the microtransactions in the game.
Yeah.
That is going to really color the overall experience of playing Diablo 4 if they get it wrong. So fingers crossed they get it right. I know I'm expecting plenty of monetization. I just hope they stick to their word when it comes to what they're monetizing. I expect the dollar values to be pretty high, though. Cosmetic skins for $25 for the good ones would be my guess. I'm just spitballing here. While there are plenty of things to critique about Diablo 4, as there are with any games that we are passionate and interested in, really, when it comes down to it, I really enjoy the game. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and I cannot wait to spend more time with Diablo 4 later this year. That is going to do it for me today. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Yeah, he brings up a lot of good points, and as do all the other reviewers. But at the end of the day, man, I physically and thoroughly enjoyed what I experienced in the beta. And the beta is a fraction of what is going to be offered in the whole game. So what can I say? I can say that the game is going to be freaking great. I'm excited, man. Listen, they could offer all these things. They could give us all this content, and it might all suck. It could be boring. It could be repetitive. Who knows? We don't know, right? So right now, I'm going to say the game is great. I'm going to say I'm thoroughly excited for the release of Diablo 4. All right. Thank you, guys. If you stuck around for these 43 minutes, you are amazing. I love you. Stick around, hit that sub button to get more notifications. I'll be making more of these videos. I know I'm excited. It's been, like I said, the longest 4 days since the end of the beta, and the next 2 months are gonna be rough. So I'm gonna be making videos. I'll be watching stuff. Oh yeah, all the things. Thank you guys. As always, stay crispy.